BBC News.
Joining me now from our UN studio in New York is Carne Ross, a former diplomat and founder of the Independent Diplomatic Consultancy, and from Central London, John Kampfner, Chief Executive of the Index on Censorship, which promotes freedom of expression. Carne Ross, let me start with you. What do you think the implications are for American diplomats? I mean, will they have to change the way they operate or work now?
I think there'll certainly be some immediate changes. I'm sure the State Department has reviewed its procedures, will probably circulate sensitive documents to a far smaller circle of people with obvious consequences for operational efficiency. But the more serious and perhaps subtle cultural changes is perhaps the more damaging, that diplomats and officials may no longer put the really sensitive stuff into cables for fear that it may be leaked in this way in future. And that will be very serious.
John Kampfner, that's one of the ironies of this, isn't it? That now we'll probably be seeing more secrecy, not less, as the US and other governments indeed clamp down.
Indeed, Kirsty, that's right. And Carne Ross makes a good point. We are awaiting some form of backlash from this. It's a fundamentally important part of democracy. It allows people to shine a light on abuses in their organisations, in government and what else and elsewhere. And yes, the unintended consequence of all of this is to make that harder, perhaps through legislation in a number of countries. But that doesn't take away, I think, from the fundamental point, which is that unless you can make a case that there is clear and present danger from a particular revelation, and thus far, unless I'm wrong, I haven't yet to see anything that points in that direction from the revelations, then it is surely a matter of democracy and free expression for the public to see what is being done and said in their name.
Carne Ross, I mean, there is a point, isn't it, that transparency does cause governments to behave a little better. And we have been given an extraordinary insight into how foreign relations are conducted by these.
Yes, and I don't think that should be a temporary insight. I mean, from my work as a diplomat working on very sensitive issues, including Iraq, Afghanistan and terrorism, I felt that far too much was kept secret. There's a kind of cultural belief inside diplomacy that the public don't need to know, that we know best, we the diplomats know best, and that clearly needs to change. I think the WikiLeaks is a very blunt instrument in terms of gaining that transparency. We need better tools of scrutiny and transparency from our own democratic institutions, which have clearly been inadequate up until now.
But John Kampfner, transparency is not always a good thing, is it? I mean, it would have been a terrible thing, for instance, if somebody had leaked Churchill's D-Day plans. That would have been very dangerous.
No, of course. If something leads to, as I said in my previous answer, a material danger that is fundamentally detrimental to a country, not something that, as far as we can see from everything that has been revealed so far, this is just simply deeply embarrassing and awkward to those people who have either said the things or the recipients of their remarks. Obviously, again, Carne Ross is right in saying this is a blunt instrument. What we need is greater checks and balances. And also, a point I made in a newspaper article today, we need the media, we need the fourth estate to stand up and be counted. And if you look at some of the big issues of the last several years, such as, for example, the failure to find weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, I'm not making a political point here, I'm making a point about the media. They were utterly supine and didn't do their job in the US, holding truth to power and to finding things out.
It has also been argued, though, John, in this case, that here we have the press deciding what is safe to release and what is not. You have newspapers like the New York Times and the Guardian. I mean, why are they in a better position to decide what should be released rather than the government?
That is a very fair point, and Bill Keller, the editor of the New York Times, one of the newspapers disclosing these issues, was referring to that in a question and answer session with his readers today. And he said, yes, it's a very difficult situation. I would argue that in an ideal situation, it would be for those elected to do that. I think the one saving grace in all of this is that it hasn't been WikiLeaks unmediated that has put this information out into the public domain. It has been through some very respectable media organisations with a strong track record in detecting dangerous material.
Just finally, to Carne Ross, do you agree with that? I mean, do you think that the press are in a position to decide what's safe and what's not safe to release?
Well, I have to respectfully disagree with John Campner, who said some very important things today, but I don't think the press is, frankly, in a good position to decide what should or should not be released. I don't like Bill Keller deciding what telegrams he thinks are safe to release and what not, or what I should see. I think there needs to be a different approach to this. The trouble is with all of this is that it shouldn't be for the press to decide, it shouldn't be for the governments to decide. There should be a more democratic form of accountability of all of this. I don't think anybody can really know whether the release of these documents is going to be good or bad. It's such an extraordinarily massive number of documents with extraordinarily sensitive information in it. This is going to have many, many multiple effects, some good, some bad, some indifferent, and nobody can predict what those effects will be.
Carne Ross and John Campner, thank you both very much.